Strong communities and strong local news go hand in hand. KUOW is a public good that keeps this community informed and connected. Your support is critical to our work. Don't wait. Join KUOW's winter fundraising drive early and make a difference today. Give now at KUOW.org or on the KUOW app.
Support comes from Mechanics Bank, a West Coast bank providing premium personal and business banking services for 120 years. They understand relationships matter and go the extra mile to help clients reach their financial goals. Stop by a branch or visit mechanicsbank.com today. Mechanics Bank, member FDIC.
The Pacific Northwest has been booming for decades.
More people are moving into the city again, and Seattle is one of just 14 cities in the U.S. that saw a population growth of 100,000 people or more. Kent is one of the fastest growing cities in the entire country.
And home builders have struggled to keep up.
That's led to a housing shortage, a homelessness crisis, and transportation headaches. But we may see an even bigger population boom here as climate change makes more places unlivable.
We could see, anywhere between 13 and 160 million Americans displaced by the kind of climate forces that I'm looking at.
Climate migration is difficult to study and even harder to predict. But some researchers say a historic population shift has already begun. I'm Monica Nicholsberg.
I'm Joshua McNichols, and this is Booming.
Today, is the Pacific Northwest ready for an influx of climate refugees? That's coming up.
So how certain is this?
There's 100% certainty of impact.
Please, don't say 100%.
So we just call it a potentially significant event.
But it isn't potentially going to happen.
99.78% to be exact.
Oh, great. Okay, so it's not 100%.
Call it 70% and let's move on.
So Monica, I've done some reporting over the years on Seattle's growth. Historically, a lot of that growth has been due to tech companies, people moving here for tech jobs. Not everybody, but a lot of people. But recently I was thinking about this woman that I talked to about a year ago. She moved up here from California after the Paradise Fire burned down her home, and she had almost nothing. She was starting completely over from scratch. And, fires like that, they're getting bigger and hotter and more routine. It made me wonder, if there's lots of people like her who are moving here to Seattle to escape those fires and other climate-related problems. I know you've seen this firsthand in your life.
Yeah, I've always been interested in climate change and natural disasters. And a big part of that is because I've lived through a lot of them. The Northridge earthquake happened when I was a little kid in LA, Hurricane Sandy when I was in college, my childhood home burned down in a wildfire, and then more recently, the Palisades fire destroyed my dad's home, and that actually led him to move up here to Bainbridge.
Monica, you are cursed.
I know. At a certain point, you're like, am I the drama? Fortunately, nobody in my life was hurt in these disasters, but they did make me really interested in how these events can change the course of a person's life. So I've been keeping a close eye on how climate change will affect migration patterns. I wondered if we were maybe already starting to see some of these shifts, so I started digging around.
What did you find?
Well, I found it is happening now, at least anecdotally, with people who are really kind of like first movers who pay a lot of attention to the environment. We put this question out there and we got a ton of responses from people who said that they'd moved here in part because of climate change.
I can't wait to hear what they told you. Are they all moving from California or what?
Well, one thing that surprised me is that people from all over the country are making this move. I thought they would mostly be people like my dad who moved here from California in the wake of wildfires, and some of them definitely were.
The heat events were getting more frequent, the fires were getting more frequent, and we reached a point where we said it's getting worse, not better down there.
Other people were escaping extreme heat and storms in the Midwest.
Thunderstorms started earlier, lasted longer, weird tornadoes happening. That was a lot of the motivation.
I heard about flooding and hurricanes in the Southeast.
Helene, when that came through, that tore up a lot of my backwoods, my backyard.
So these people all faced very different climate problems, and they all arrived at the same solution. Move to Washington. Why do they think the Pacific Northwest is any safer from a climate standpoint.
Well, this feels like a good time to acknowledge that we're talking about perception here, the view that places will be safer. But climate change is not predictable. It's changing the weather everywhere. And we're not immune to disasters here, especially wildfires, flooding, droughts. But that being said, there are some things about our climate that can mitigate the risk. We get a lot of rain west of the Cascades, which can reduce the danger of catastrophic fire and make it easier to grow food. We have fairly reliable fresh water sources. Running out of water is something that people with climate anxiety worry a lot about, speaking from experience.
Yeah, I get that. But we've got water shortages here too. We're having more and more summers when water reservoirs hit historic lows. It's not as bad as California, but still.
Right, that's what I mean. There's no real climate haven. It's all relative. We have more stable temperatures than a lot of the country, like the Sun Belt or the Midwest, but we've had big heat waves here too. Most of the western Pacific Northwest is under relatively moderate climate risk, according to FEMA's index.
So these people feel like, the threat they're facing in these other places is greater than they might face here. So they're moving to avoid the threat of extreme weather and natural disasters and stuff.
Yeah, but that's not the only factor. A lot of the time there are economic incentives to move away from places with extreme climate too. Homeowners insurance is becoming a really big problem in a lot of parts of the country. There are places like Florida that have a lot of flooding, or the wildfires in California that we mentioned. And it's becoming impossible in some of those places to get homeowners insurance, especially if a home is in what's called the wildland-urban interface. Typically, when you buy a house, you get homeowners insurance in the private market. But if you can't, then your only option is often what's called a FAIR plan. That stands for Fair Access to Insurance Requirements. And it's insurance that the state offers to people, but it's meant to only be a temporary solution until you can find insurance on the private market. These plans are really expensive, and they're not set up for a lot of people to be on them long term. This is something that I heard about from our insurance commissioner, Patty Kuderer.
The FAIR plan is the insurer of last resort, and so that's a bellwether.
Florida has more than 1 million people on its state plan. California has about half of that. But Patty said here in Washington, the number is much smaller, 400 people are on the FAIR plan here.
Okay, that's a big difference. So fewer people here are signed up for this catastrophic insurance of last resort.
Yeah, exactly. I talked to this woman, Cameron Goldman. She goes by Cam.
I grew up in California, Southern California.
She moved to Bellingham a few years ago from LA. She used to live in this gorgeous canyon, as she describes it. But it was in that wildland-urban interface, and the likelihood of a fire was really high. The FAIR plan was her only option for homeowners insurance there.
But also every year it was the big question of whether that was going to be the year that we lost everything, that a fire would just rip through.
She ended up moving to another house in LA where she could get private insurance.
But in retrospect now, having seen the Eaton fires and the Palisades fire, and we weren't safe there either. Because if the conditions are just right or just wrong, nothing's going to stop the flames. So I feel so much safer up here.
It does make sense that if you can't afford to insure your home, you'd have to move. But that can be complicated. It may mean leaving family or friends behind, or a job.
Yeah, it's the reason that most of my family and friends from growing up are still living there, even though they acknowledge this risk. It's a big decision to move, especially to another state. And for everybody that I talked to for this story, there was more than one thing driving their decision to move here. Cam, for example, has a daughter here. My sources all said that climate change was a driving factor, but it was combined with other things, like rising costs or family and friends here, or even medical issues that made the more moderate climate healthier for them. People are complicated. A lot of factors influence their decisions. And that's part of what makes climate migration so hard to track. I'll give you another example. I met a guy named Jason Devmark when I was up in Bellingham.
I'll show you around a little bit out here, and then we'll go show you the creek.
He's an environmental writer. He's written 2 books on climate change, and he and his family moved up here from Oakland a few years ago.
Suburban homestead dream, right? I guess.
So you've mentioned 2 people moving to Bellingham. I can understand why. I grew up there, and it's the loveliest town I know. It has this very DIY culture, lots of small independent businesses. It's a good place for starting over.
Yeah, Jason and Cam don't know each other, but they both said that they think it's sort of this little enclave for climate migrants.
Huh.
And Jason has this really lovely property that backs up into a forest.
I mean, in Oakland, we had a big garden. In San Francisco, I ran an urban farm. So I've been doing this for a while. Hello, girls.
Feeding chickens.
Yes, the telltale signs.
If there's any eggs, it's kind of my midday routine.
Jason grew up in Arizona, and his partner is from Bellingham. They wanted to get away from the drought and the wildfire hazard in Northern California and be closer to family.
I've got friends and family still in Arizona. I wish them all the best. But if I'm thinking about my daughter who's going to live into the latter parts of the 21st century, I just don't see Arizona as being a place of high ecological resilience. So then if it's sort of like, are we going to go to Phoenix or Bellingham? Well, knowing what I know about climate change, the answer is Bellingham.
Okay, so say the predictions are true and we're going to get a lot of inbound migration. I'm trying to imagine how that would play out. This region has had a hard time managing growth in the past. I mean, over the years, the Seattle area has added jobs much faster than it's added new homes. So what kind of growth from, people moving here as climate refugees are we looking at?
Yeah, we're already behind in managing growth in a lot of ways. There was this article in The Atlantic a few years ago by Abram Lustgarten, and it really stuck with me. He's a reporter, but he also does a lot of climate migration forecasting, and he wrote a book on the topic. In this article, he was kind of imagining what America would look like if the southern states become uninhabitable, and he described this megalopolis of Pacific Northwest cities.
This idea of a megalopolis comes up through those conversations, half in jest, but also realistically, as what happens to a region when you have a big city like Vancouver to the north and cities like Portland, Oregon, and Seattle more or less in a line. Those places can start to, with extreme population growth, begin to connect and just become really one large, more urban region.
Yeah, this is that whole idea of Cascadia. People want to build a bullet train connecting it all.
I really hope that they do at some point. It's important to know that Abram is envisioning this over a long timeline. And when other researchers have looked at this topic, like the UW, they acknowledge that climate migration is likely, but they think it's going to happen gradually over time. But Abram said that the time to prepare for this is now. And that's because big infrastructure projects that you need to deal with all this growth, like affordable housing or high-speed rail, they're really expensive. Cities usually need to borrow money to get them done. And if they borrow that money now, it'll be cheaper because the lenders still haven't really factored in the future costs of climate change.
The municipal bond market itself is a fascinating little corner of this conversation because it supports something like 75 or 80% of all, investment in building in the United States by cities and states and small towns. And when the climate risks become more apparent to that market, the cost of borrowing will go up.
He says that these destination cities that are expected to have a lot of migration should take advantage of that by building lots of housing and expanding transportation networks now.
Yeah, I was just covering this a couple of years ago in the city of SeaTac, south of Seattle. They're using municipal bonds to move their city hall and build a whole bunch of housing right around a light rail station. And, a lot of people are worried that it's really expensive, but what I'm hearing from you is that could get a lot more expensive in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Also, I could totally see housing costs in smaller towns like Bellingham or Mount Vernon skyrocketing if they don't get ahead of this.
Yeah, which is something that we're already starting to see.
Okay. So we know that anecdotally, people are moving here and they're being driven by real concerns and the higher cost of things like insurance, which is more expensive because of those climate risks.
Right.
But there's a lot we don't know about how this region's risks will change here in Western Washington. Are the people moving here prepared for the possibility that climate disasters could end up following them here?
Yes, definitely. These are people who follow environmental news very closely. They understand that no place is completely safe. Jason made this really clear when I talked to him.
There is no way. No place is completely immune to the shocks of climate chaos. I'm under no illusions that this is somehow like an impregnable fortress. It totally is not.
But there is one thing that does make Jason feel like his family is relatively safer. They're close with their neighbors.
The best climate antidote is neighborliness, is really like having a tight-knit community. If there were to be, God forbid, a fast-moving fire or a flood, it's your neighbors who are going to come to your rescue before anybody else. So I think it's really like those social characteristics of a community that are going to provide the biggest insurance check against climate chaos and extreme weather.
Yeah, I see this whenever I've gone out to cover flooding stories, which seems to happen every year. Somebody at a restaurant brings free food to the relief workers, you know?
Yeah, without fail. This is something that I also experienced in some of those natural disasters I mentioned earlier. During Hurricane Sandy, people built these big generator islands in the middle of the streets in New York so that anybody could come and charge their phones. Or like in LA, you would have movie stars directing traffic during evacuations.
Yeah, go Jennifer Gardner.
Yes, shout out. The reality is that none of us can predict where or how the next climate disaster is going to strike. But we can form these strong bonds with our community and take care of each other when it does.
Yeah. Well, thanks for bringing us this story, Monica.
Happy to. That's it for Booming. Thanks for listening.
If you have a question about the economy that you want us to answer, email us at booming@kuow.org or leave us a voicemail at 206-221-7158.
And a special thanks to those of you who are donating to the show, like Kaza. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. If you want to donate, go to kuow.org/booming. And thanks.
Our producers are Lucy Suchek and Alec Cowan. Our editor is Carol Smith. I'm Joshua McNichols.
I'm Monica Nicholsberg.
And we'll see you next time.
Strong communities and strong local news go hand in hand. KUOW is a public good that keeps this community informed and connected. Your support is critical to our work. Don't wait. Join KUOW's winter fundraising drive early and make a difference today. Give now at KUOW.org or on the KUOW app.
On the latest Sound Politics, stop me if you've heard this one. The state is facing a budget gap, a big one. Democrats want to raise taxes to fill it. The governor doesn't.
That does sound like what happened earlier this year when the governor said he did not want to raise taxes, and then he flipped and signed a big old tax hike through anyway.
Is it going to play out the same way next year? We'll talk about it on the latest Sound Politics, wherever you get your podcasts.